Why are they succeeding? Why is their recovery improving? Why is their longevity expanding? How are they reducing inflammation and able to train harder, more frequently, and prevent injuries? And how are they able to get this quality energy from their diet and all of these types of things?
Yeah! What's up, everybody? Your life alchemist, your dragon. Welcome to Alchemize Life. I'm your host, Justin David Carl. This is a show where I seek out and share expertise, wisdom, and thought leadership in all domains with the mission of empowering and inspiring you to proactively design and truly live a life worth living. We're all in this together, and when we do the work together, we go so much farther, so much faster, and have so much more fun. Without further ado, let's dig into this episode and alchemize life. Robert Cheeke, welcome to the show, the Godfather of Vegan Bodybuilding, and more importantly, or at least more recently, the co-author of the best-selling book, New York Times best-selling book, The Plant-Based Athlete. And I'm so incredibly excited to have you on here because I was inspired to become a vegan athlete after watching the documentary, The Game Changers, which featured not only tons of different athletes from baseball players and football players and ultra endurance athletes, but also bodybuilders. Because up until I'd seen that documentary, the only vegan athletes I was aware of was endurance athletes. So I literally thought every vegan athlete was super skinny and didn't have muscles. And I've always wanted to have at least somewhat of a muscular body. I like to think of my ideal body being like the body of a gymnast, very compact, muscular, very aesthetic. And that movie totally changed my perspective. And then as I dug into everything, I realized there was a man named Robert Cheeke that has really been a foundational part of the vegan fitness, vegan athlete movement. And I got to connect with you at my first vegan event, big vegan event, the Vegan Street Fair that just happened the other week. And having gone vegan right before the pandemic, this was just a monumental moment for me to meet you, a best-selling author and really a major figure in the vegan fitness scene, and just connect with so many beautiful vegan people. So, Robert, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Couple other notes about you before I pass it over to start talking about the book. But you've been vegan for 26 years. You're the author of 5 books, many of them, if not all of them, bestsellers. You grew up on a farm in Oregon, similar to me. We may have to dig into that. You're a long distance runner turned bodybuilder in your younger years. And any other important notes I missed there?
Hey, Dragon, I just appreciate you having me on the show, and thanks for taking the time. And thank you for the intro. And it is a pleasure to be here with you. And it was a pleasure to work with you a couple of weeks ago in LA.
Yep.
And looking forward to talking about getting the most out of life here with you today.
Awesome, brother. Well, you and I talked before the show, but there's 2 pieces that we really want to cover in this particular episode. The first part is talking about this book, because this book is really incredible. The Plant-Based Athlete, co-authored with your friend Matt Frazier. And it's really, I think, one of the first books that showcases just the huge variety of world-class, ultra-performing, top of their sport athletes in all domains that are fully vegan. And it shares so many incredible stories, but it also is really like a guidebook for anyone who wants to adopt a fit lifestyle that is plant-based. I don't know of any other books like it.
Yeah, I don't think so. And that was really the objective. The whole goal of this book was to tell the compelling stories of the world's greatest plant-based athletes. And it was to showcase a lot of athletes that people weren't familiar with. Obviously, the Game Changers came out before the book and showcased all these different amazing athletes like Nima and Misha and Patrick Baboumian and a bunch who had their moment in the spotlight. And I wanted to write about a lot of other athletes that were the top of their sport and maybe some sports that were less popular. Duathlon, like Laura Klein, who's a world champion in duathlon. People don't really know a whole lot about her. Or
Yeah.
Andreas Wojta, who is an athlete, Olympic runner from Austria, but kind of under the radar. Or Orla Walsh, who's gaining popularity on social media, is a national champion track cyclist in her country of Ireland. Has a very similar story to Dotsie Bausch and so many different parallels, which is really fun to tell those stories in the book and to highlight some of the popular names like Rich Roll and others, Scott Jurek, that you might expect in a book like The Plant-Based Athlete. And that was the objective, was to tell these stories and allow them to be inspiration for a lot of readers and to tie their stories into the evidence-based science that explains their success. So why are they succeeding? Why is their recovery improving? Why is their longevity expanding? How are they reducing inflammation and able to train harder, more frequently and prevent injuries? And how are they able to get this quality energy from their diet and all of these types of things? And so the evidence-based science that explains eating anti-inflammatory foods, avoiding pro-inflammatory foods, having a high net gain nutritional return on investment or yield from your diet, eating foods that are high in vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, nitric oxide to increase blood flow, avoiding dietary cholesterol, reducing saturated fat, understanding calorie density and nutrient density, and consuming a diet that is designed to support your athletic goals, regardless of what those are. We wanted to explain all of that, but use these stories of champion bodybuilders and mixed martial artists and endurance athletes and strength athletes, men and women alike from around the globe to show that you can do this.
Yeah.
Here are all these examples of people who have, and you can too, if you follow these guidelines and principles and do it with consistency, transparency, and accountability over time. So
Yeah. It's so powerful too, because in my own vegan fitness origin story, it wasn't until I saw someone that I could relate to or that I admired that I even considered the possibility of going vegan. Because honestly, Robert, before watching that documentary, I'm a longtime listener of Rich Roll, big fan, but I was never vegan. I was like, yeah, I'm interested in that lifestyle, but I could never go vegan because I don't want to be super skinny. Like, I want to have some muscles. And I have massive respect for endurance athletes. It's just not my sport of choice. And I really admired Rich Roll because his journey, we both went to Stanford at different times, and we both have a history of addiction and recovery. And I'm very into personal transformation, and Rich Roll is too. But it wasn't until I saw the bodybuilders in the Game Changers, and I think it's that I considered the possibility, and I think it's incredible that you've highlighted so many different athletes so that no matter what sport you're pursuing, there's almost like for sure somebody in this book that is doing that sport at the highest level. And you, like you said, they may not have a platform. They may not have hundreds of thousands of followers on Instagram, but they are literally competing at the top of their field, and you've given them a voice. And that's such a beautiful thing.
well, I appreciate that, Justin. And one of the cool things about the book, I think, is that I personally interviewed about 60 world-class athletes, but a dozen Olympians, a dozen world champions, dozens and dozens of pro athletes from all different sports, and got to hear their stories and tell those stories. And of course, just the stories that I told were just an abbreviated version of the conversations that I had, whether they're former NBA champions or Guinness World Record holders, current world record holders, athletes of all different types and backgrounds. But one of the cool things was that I wanted to make sure there was somebody that you could relate to. Like we have Josh Lajani in the book, who was 420 pounds as a injured college football player. He was 320 pounds at 6'3" as a college football player, got hurt, went into depression, added another 100 pounds by eating really bad food down in the bayou in Louisiana and drinking lots of alcohol and all of that, and ballooned to 420 pounds. And he's a guy who went on to be inspired by all people, inspired by Scott Jurek. And he became a long distance ultra runner, not just an ultra runner who shows up and gets a medal for crossing the finish line by walking. He got all the way down to 180 pounds at 6'3". So he dropped hundreds of pounds and he's won. He's been a champion, an ultra marathon champion. And so he has this incredible weight loss story. And we also, you talked about addiction. We have people who have overcome suicide attempts and overdose and drug addiction. Dotsie Bausch is quite open about that. And she went on to win an Olympic medal in track cycling. John Joseph, who's in the book, overcame addiction as well and overcame all kinds of childhood poverty and problems that he had in his life. And Laura Klein talked about some of that stuff too, some of her struggles in her personal life, and became the world champion, the best in the entire world at her sport. And we also wanted to talk about people who were new to this lifestyle, like Chris Paul in the NBA, who completely revitalized his career when he adopted a plant-based diet in 2019 and has been like basically an MVP type player in the NBA ever since, being in the All-Star game every single year ever since, and the NBA Finals last year. And I had the opportunity to chat with him briefly in person. But also, I wanted to showcase a number of athletes who've been vegan since birth as well. So not just people who've been doing it for a couple of years, or not just some of the icons like Scott Jurek, Rip Esselstyn, Rich Roll, Brendan Brazier, the people you think of, oh yeah, the OG vegan athletes that have been doing it for decades, but also people in obscure sports like professional bodybuilding, which is what's synonymous with like as much muscle and meat and masculinity as possible, and becoming an IFBB pro at the highest level, talking about Jahina Malik, who's been vegan since birth. And then siblings from Canada, one who went on to be an Olympic snowboarder and what do you call it? The X Games gold medalist, and his sister, an ultra marathon, sorry, not just ultra marathon, ultra triathlon world champion. And they've been vegan since birth as well. Kevin and Shonda Hill, I'm referring to. And so we wanted to cover a lot of ground. And like Fiona Oakes, who was told she probably wasn't ever going to be able to walk or run properly because she was born without a right kneecap in her leg, and then went on to set Guinness World Records as a marathon runner and has been vegan for 5 decades. And she was 5 years old and now she's in her 50s. And stories like that people overcoming challenges, people living their best lives, people who are doing this for other reasons. They're wanting to either speak up for animals or represent themselves or movement or an idea in a certain way, and have told a wonderful story. And so for me to be able to share those stories in a book that went on to become a New York Times bestseller, a #1 international bestseller, it translated into 6 other languages for 7 languages total, Amazon and Publishers Weekly bestseller, and to have an impact on a lot of people is a pretty rewarding thing to experience. So I'm very pleased with it.
Monumental achievement, brother. You're making waves in this world. It's really beautiful. So before we dive in to more of the book and maybe bust some myths and share some of the nutritional guidelines and parts of the book that are really educational and empowering, tell us about your vegan athlete origin story.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a complicated one at times, but I grew up on a farm in Western Oregon. My parents met in the animal science department at Oregon State University. My dad is a world-renowned expert in raising animals for food production. He wrote about 15 textbooks on that topic. So both my parents grew up on farms. They raised me and my siblings on a farm. I used to bottle feed baby calves before getting on the school bus, checking for eggs when I get home from school, taking care of different animals from horses and ponies to cows and chickens and ducks and geese and turkeys and goats and all of that, and being in 4-H and showing animals at the county fair and at the state fair, and then selling them at the auction to be turned into somebody's meal, which is a rough way to say goodbye to your friends. And so it was around that time, 1995, December 8th, 1995, my older sister organized this animal rights week at my high school. And she was already vegan and was and done some compelling things in animal rights, even on our local small farm or in our county of in 4-H. Things like instead of selling the chickens at the auction, like basically buying them back to bring them back home so they could just live out their lives there rather than someone else bidding the $60 or whatever it was for broiler chickens to a Cornish crossbreed to take home. She was doing some inspiring stuff. So when she organized this animal rights week at our high school, I decided I would participate. And so I watched videos of factory farming and animal testing and had conversations with people and read literature and decided I wanted to keep it going. But I had a lot of concerns. I was a 5-sport athlete. I was always athletic. I was small. I was a small guy, but I was always athletic. I was a runner. I was a soccer player, a basketball player. I was in track and field. I was a wrestler. I wanted to be a pro wrestler when I got older. And so I was into it. I played tennis. I played all these other, recreational sports, cycling, in addition to formal team sports for the school. And so I wondered, can I get bigger and stronger? Can I actually build my body without animal protein, without animal foods at all? Like, I thought milk did a body good. I watched the commercials. I saw the guy get bigger and his voice get deeper and getting more awesome, to the point that I remember one particular day I was basically drinking so much milk, I was like vomiting over the porch of our, farmhouse. I was so determined to get bigger and stronger. And so I even hesitated, actually. In my first couple of weeks of being vegan, I was kind of getting frustrated because I was barely weighing over 100 pounds. I told my sister, why can't I just drink as much milk and eat as much meat as possible and then get into veganism maybe a couple of years when I'm older? I'm maybe 18 years old or something like that. And she said, Robert, at the end of the day, it's not that you need meat, milk, and eggs for nutrition. You need the nutrition that's commonly associated with those things: the protein, calcium, vitamins, minerals, essential fats, that kind of stuff. So I went out on my journey and I stuck with it. I struggled at first. We talked about it off air. I didn't really know what to eat. I knew what I didn't want to eat, which was animals. I didn't want to eat animals anymore.
What'd you start with? What were you eating in the
But
beginning?
what to eat?
Illuminate the
Yeah,
audience.
I would maybe have some cereal for breakfast, if I recall, with some soy milk, and then go to school. And in the cafeteria, they had those bread rolls, the little white, refined, fluffy little bread rolls. And I would
Yep.
eat those like crazy. I would eat these bagels I got at the local co-op. In my college town, we had a co-op. So I would get these bagels from the co-op and I would eat them like crazy. That was basically the thing that I ate. And then I would eat like corn chips and salsa because I don't know, I wanted something else to eat. And then I did something. I was really involved in, I was part of this group, Students for Peace Through Global Responsibility. So I got really into trying to do sustainable stuff, right? So I learned about composting. I had no idea what it was, but what I did was outside one of our classrooms at our high school, I just started dumping all my banana peels and orange peels. I think even with the stickers still on, and it just looked like garbage. It just looked like there was like littering on the school property. But that was my compost pile. I had no idea how you're actually supposed to make compost and how you're supposed to mix it with other things and stir it and add paper and all this stuff. I just made this like landfill outside a classroom at my high school because I would eat outside during lunch with my friends and I was just eating fruit and bagels was pretty much it. And yeah, I felt pretty bloated. I didn't feel all that great. My stomach was upset a lot from that kind of stuff. And it took a little bit of time before I understood how to adjust and adapt my diet to be a little bit more inclusive of other foods. And so there was that growing period, but I stuck with it. And eventually I was a pretty good high school athlete on the #1 and #2 ranked teams in the entire state in soccer and cross country. And I had the great opportunity to run 1 year in college. Well, again, I wasn't great, but I was good enough to run for 1 year at Oregon State University in their cross country club. And I enjoyed that. And then I just checked in right here. Like, what do I really want to do?
Mhm.
I wanted to get bigger and stronger. Like I always did. I grew up in the 80s watching He-Man and Captain Planet and Hulk Hogan. And I just wanted to be bigger and stronger. And I was tired of getting knocked around on the soccer field and the basketball court and the wrestling mat. And then I had this association now that I was the vegan guy. I wanted to represent myself differently. I wanted to represent veganism differently. And
Mhm.
mind you, this is the 1990s. The internet was brand new at this time. There weren't books or documentaries on this subject. I had to figure it out. And so that's why, as you said in one of our recordings today, that I'm often considered the godfather of vegan bodybuilding, because I started that in the late 90s when I got into the Body for Life program by Bill Phillips, and completely transformed my physique and added like almost 30 pounds in 1 year when I started lifting, and became a bodybuilder by the next year, and went on to compete in bodybuilding for a decade. And it all started with just this desire to get bigger and stronger and show that I could do it without harming animals. And that
Mhm.
was honestly my goal. And I did it, and I won bodybuilding competitions. I filmed a documentary called Vegan Fitness Built Naturally in 2005. It's pretty funny to look back on it now because it was so old school back then. It was the same year that YouTube came out, so it was pretty rough, but it's a fun one. That was 2005, and I started a speaking tour then, which I'm still on today. I was on tour. I wasn't speaking, but I was still on tour when I saw you in Los Angeles 2 weeks ago, where I was
Mhm.
signing books in bookstores and signing books at the booth and talking to people and all that. Been doing that for 17 years now. So that's how it started. And throughout this journey, I've gone back and forth from bodybuilding to runner to back into bodybuilding, and then just training for the fun of it. And now I'm in my 40s, and just taking it, day by day, and sometimes setting new and specific goals. Like right now, I'm doing a weight loss challenge with Nimai and the vegan fitness crew, and I'm down 10 pounds in 3 weeks. And that's a
Wow.
specific goal that I'm working on. So you're just taking it as it comes
That's
these days.
awesome. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your origin story. The success that I found so quickly when I adopted a vegan lifestyle with my fitness is largely because of the work that you and others have done before me. Because I was the beneficiary of being able to I listened to your podcast interview with Nimai when I first went vegan, and I followed you and him on Instagram and the other vegan fitness influencers. And it was like so easy to go vegan. Like I was like, oh, this is what they're eating today. Oh, okay, cool. Like they're modeling the lifestyle, the eating habits, and the bodies that I wanted to have. And there's so many myths and misinformation out there around diet and nutrition in general. And everyone always asks, like, where do you get your protein? And I think the question is hilarious even now, but still over 2 years in, people are still saying to me when they find out I'm vegan, oh, where do you, like, you're fairly muscular, Justin. Like, where do you get your protein? And this being the first episode on the show where we're talking about the vegan lifestyle and being a vegan athlete, let's break that myth down. Like, where do vegans get their protein?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. In fact, I was asked that yesterday. I mean, I'm in my 27th year now as a vegan athlete, been doing this for more than 26 years. I was wearing a vegan hoodie in the gym last night, sitting in the sauna afterwards, and someone was asking me, like, "Hey, I saw your vegan shirt. You got a vegan restaurant or something?" I said, "Oh no, I'm a writer and um, author, and I do that kind of stuff." And so he was asking me all of those questions about protein, about this and about that, and I had a great time answering it, even though I've been answering the question for most of my adult life, for more than a quarter century. Like, I didn't mind because it was out of genuine curiosity. And so my first response was, well, there's no one main source. There's no one main source of protein. So the protein comes from amino acids, which are found in all food. So certainly some have more than others. Like soybeans and legumes in general have more protein than mangoes and other fruits. And nuts and seeds are going to have more than, most vegetables. And certain legumes are going to have more than grains, that kind of stuff. But the whole objective is to eat basically what your calorie needs are. And if you reach your true calorie needs, which you find out from the Harris Benedict equation or using a Harris Benedict calculator, which is going to factor in your gender, age, height, weight, and activity level, about how many calories you expend per day. That's how you determine
Yep.
how many calories to consume per day. When you don't do that, most people, at least in the Western world, end up
Yep.
overeating and becoming overweight or obese. On that, currently, 73.6 of Americans are 73.6% of Americans are overweight. 42.5% of Americans are obese
Yep.
right now. There's a lot of reasons for that, and I could talk more about that in a moment. But a large part of that is that we're so focused on reaching these protein goals that we eat a lot of food that has protein in it, but also has a lot of excess calories in it. Has sometimes tons of dietary cholesterol, especially in based foods, a bunch of saturated fat, tons of added oils, oftentimes sugars and high sodium and all these other things that are part of what could be considered the protein
Yep.
baggage that comes with it. And so there's this obsession with protein, which is important, absolutely. And general recommendations are zero 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight for inactive people and 1.2 to 2.0 grams per kilogram of body weight for athletes, people who are much more. It comes out to a little bit less than 1 gram per pound of
Yep.
body weight if you crunch the numbers. And that's based on tons of scientific studies and trials and human trials with men and women following weight training programs using omnivorous diet and plant-based diet and using the same amount of 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight and achieving the exact same results, whether it was on a plant-based diet or a mixed diet supplemented with whey protein. As long as the calories are roughly the same, the protein is the same, the results are the same. But obviously there's other factors involved too, including oftentimes the animal protein being class 1 or 2, class 1 or class 2A
Yep.
carcinogens, being very probable, very likely that they will contribute to cancer growth. Often, as I alluded to, often have dietary cholesterol, saturated fat, excess calories. To reach your protein goals as a vegan, it is simply to understand what your true calorie needs are and then to create any kind of meal plan that reaches those. And by default, just because of the macronutrient breakdown of protein, carbohydrates, and fats, you are very likely to reach those targets without even trying. If you're an athlete, if you're maybe particularly a weightlifter, or you have emphasis on strength and power and explosive sports, you might want to pay a little more attention to that. But it's still easy to do. It's just eating a little bit more lentils or beans or having a protein drink if that's what you want to do, or having some tofu or tempeh or
Yep.
edamame, or have an extra peanut butter sandwich or almond butter on sliced apples or whatever the case is. It's just making a small little concerted effort to do that. And protein is very easy to reach. There's also some things to consider from a large scale perspective, like looking in or looking from the outside looking in, that how many people have we come across? I'm asking you, I'm asking your audience, I'm asking the listeners. How many people have you come across in the Western world, people who have access to proper calories, nutrition? How many people have you come across with a true clinical protein deficiency? It is incredibly rare. It does exist. There's medical condition for it, but I don't know. I've been on tour for
I've never met somebody who has a protein deficiency, like a true one.
yeah. I've been on tour for 17 years, met a lot of people. There were tens of thousands of people at the event we went to recently. I've rarely ever come across it. And you know how when you do come across it, typically there's something going on. Usually there's an eating disorder. Okay. So if there's an eating disorder, that could lead to a protein deficiency. Of course, that makes sense. Or if there's this absolutely malnutrition because of poverty, basically either poverty or inaccess to proper calories and proper food. Otherwise, you don't see protein deficiency. But how many times do you see excess protein intake? Well, I already gave you the stats. 73.6% of Americans are overweight, and protein's a big part of that. We're not just from drinking Pepsi and Coke. That contributes to it for sure, but it's largely that we are a fast food nation. We're a restaurant food nation. We're a family diner nation. We're a TV dinner nation. We're a microwave nation. And so all of those things contribute. And to avoid that, we simply just eat a little bit lower in the food chain, eat a little bit more naturally, and focus on plant-based foods that, in addition to providing protein, will also provide very often carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, fiber, nitric oxide, all of these things that are beneficial, phytonutrients, water, all the things that we need to be our best selves are right there in potatoes and broccoli and blueberries and mangoes and lentils and beans and all of that stuff. And so I don't think protein is as big of an issue as we make it out to be. It's a very big marketing thing. There's protein water, there's protein popcorn, there's probably protein cotton
Protein
candy. I don't know.
chips, like,
There's protein anything out there because it
yep.
sells. Protein's really good at selling
Yeah.
things.
Hey there. just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Veg Nutrition. Live better. So I'm actually a veg elite athlete. And before I joined the team, I spent months doing my due diligence to make sure that the company was vision, mission, and value aligned with me, my values, my mission, my vision, and my lifestyle. I got to know the owners super well. I even got to know the person who formulates all the products, and they passed with flying colors. So I couldn't be more excited to represent a company that I feel so aligned with. And I want to tell you about two of my favorite products. The first is the veg pre workout. So when I first went vegan, or mostly vegan, the last thing for me to go fully vegan was finding a vegan pre workout that gave me the focus, the energy, and the power that I was looking for. And I can tell you, this is the best pre workout that I've ever had. It gives me incredible focus and energy. And what's probably the best is it leaves me with no crash after I take it, which is great. And the flavors are so freaking good. There's literally peach mango and a Patriot Pop that tastes like, the firecracker popsicles, cherry lemon lime flavor. They're literally so good that I can dry scoop them. And they just released a watermelon flavor for just in time for summer, and it's incredible. So that's the first product. The second product is arguably also my favorite, and that's the plant protein. Comes in three incredible flavors: chocolate peanut butter, vanilla ice cream, and cold brew coffee. Yep, you heard me. Cold brew coffee flavor. It tastes incredible, all three flavors, 25 grams of protein, fully organic, incredible ingredients, heavy metal tested, and it is my go-to post workout. Make sure that I'm recovering and refueling and giving my muscles the protein that they need to rebuild for that next workout. So go to vegnutrition.com/dragon and try their full line of supplements, and you'll get 15% off. Or you can just use Dragon at checkout and you'll get 15% off. So that's vegnutrition.com/dragon to get 15% off. Veg Nutrition, live better. I heard I don't know if this is true, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that one of the reasons that protein powders became so popular is the dairy industry realized there was a byproduct to cheese called whey,
Yeah.
and they realized that they could bottle it up and sell it. And normally, previously to bottling and selling it, they threw it away. And so
Yeah.
basically, they signed up, they went out and got all the classic bodybuilders, Arnold and all them, to be their sponsors. And is there truth to that story?
Yeah, absolutely. That's how protein powders came about. Nobody was using protein powders. Yes, we had this trend post World War to start eating more meat. It was people were starving, people were hungry, people wanted dense calories, and they came from animals. And then microwaves and TV dinners and television and radio and advertisements came along, and it became associated with masculinity. And the more meat you ate, the more manly you were, and providing for your family and all this kind of stuff. And it didn't matter that we started to get more heart disease and heart attacks and lower longevity and higher mortality rates and all of that as a result. But we really got into eating meat. But then there was this processing, like you alluded to, the separation of curds and whey in this cheese making process, where there was this leftover byproduct that just we toss it. We don't need this whey stuff. We got the curds, and we'll make some cheese, and we sell that, and people get addicted to it. People love cheese. But this way, they were able to. It's highly bioavailable protein because it's designed to grow a baby calf to be a couple thousand pounds. It's designed to grow. And so people started they made this powder. Athletes started getting interested in this, and like probably the 60s or so, 60s, 70s, it started really gain traction in the 80s and 90s, of course. And this byproduct that is designed for this concentrated protein, this dairy protein, to make baby calves grow from 40 pounds to 400 pounds in a short amount of time, something that bodybuilders started taking. And of course they're growing, but so are tumor cells in their body. So are other things in their body. There's insulin like growth factor 1 that is problematic, that comes from the inclusion of whey and casein protein. And so here's this byproduct that was going to be tossed. And now it turned into this multi-billion-dollar industry. And people got obsessed with it, with isolated proteins, and wanting more whey protein and wanting more casein protein and wanting more dairy, and started using it. And bodybuilders represented it. And it was featured in magazines, which were really popular back before, especially before the internet. And everybody was reading magazines and muscle magazines. And we went through this fitness craze, this era where people wanted to get bigger and stronger. And it was part of the American dream and all this stuff. And whey played a part in that. And it wasn't until probably the 90s when plant protein powders really started to come onto the scene to kind of combat this, or provide another option for people who really liked concentrated protein. And, even though most people really didn't need more protein, they believed they did, so they wanted it. So these, it was soy protein and rice protein were the early ones, and hemp protein, and, pea protein came along years. It wasn't until years later. And now pea protein is gold standard now, kind of the main one that people use today. But those came around to provide another option for people, to give people something different to try that didn't involve the animal cruelty. The way you get, milk in the first place is by taking the baby calf away from its mother, because that's where the milk is intended to go to. But on big farms, that's not the case. Take it from their mothers, and then humans are drinking the milk when the cows are milked for large scale farming. So our obsession with protein runs pretty. It is important. We need it for all kinds of things, hormone functions, for maintaining mass and strength, and repairing muscle tissue, replenishing and repairing after workouts, and feeling satiated, and all this kind of stuff. But we can achieve that obviously with a plant-based diet. And now there's plant-based protein supplements of all types for those who want to do that, particularly athletes and bodybuilders. So there's a long story to protein.
A
That's just
huge part of American culture. And it's really fascinating, I think, to look back at kind of the driving factors that created the protein industry. And it was, unfortunately, is money and profits, right? It's instead of throwing this byproduct away,
Right.
like, how do we make more money? And that's really unfortunate, because a cultural revolution almost sprung up around that industry. And now there's this over obsession on protein. And like you mentioned, most people are getting enough protein. And I would say for the everyday person who isn't like a top performing athlete in a particular field, like, they're probably getting just enough. And if you are focused on a sport and you want to take your performance to the next level, it's just being a little bit more intentional about including more protein sources in your diet. Things that are, for me, it's so easy. I can go a day without a protein smoothie and hit my protein targets, no problem. I choose to have a scoop of protein because I love a protein smoothie after the gym, because it's like a treat. Like, when I blend it up, this is my milkshake, quote unquote milkshake. Like, it's my protein shake, my milk free shake. And it's like a treat to myself. And I know I'm giving my muscles that fuel to rebuild. But there's plenty of days like where I'm like, oh, I just feel like eating whole food today. And I'll completely forego any protein powder. And I just make sure I include a little bit more tempeh, a little more tofu, more beans. And it's no problem for me to get 130 to 150 grams of protein, which is more than enough for me, because I'm 153 pounds. I float between 153 and 157. And that's, like you said, like, zero point 0.8 per gram per pound of body weight up to a gram. And I've even seen some studies that you can go as low as zero point 0.6 and still be like a strength athlete. And that's plenty of protein. And then if you're like an endurance athlete or like someone who's more into the more cardiocentric sports, you need even less protein. And then again, if you're not like pursuing some physical sport endeavor, like you're probably getting more than enough, whether you're on omnivore diet or a vegan diet. So I appreciate you covering some ground there. There is a huge protein myth that's running.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that question, where to get your protein? There's so many different answers. You could say, well, the same place your protein gets its protein, from plants, because animals that we eat, they get their protein from plants. You could say, just again, succinct answers, where to get your protein from a whole variety of sources from everything that I eat. I used to joke, you just go eat a burrito, plenty of protein in that, in the beans and rice and the vegetables and tortilla and everything. Like it's just so easy to find that, like you said, there's really little extra effort you have to make. People will be surprised at how easily they hit their protein targets if they actually take the time to document their nutrition intake for a few days or even a week. It could be eye-opening to realize, oh, wow, I didn't realize I ate thousands of calories a day and 150 grams of protein every single day without even trying. I just didn't realize that about myself. And so I definitely encourage people to do that, to give that a try and realize that protein is it's all around us. It's in the amino acids in all the foods that we eat. And we get all the essential amino acids from our diet, and they all work together harmoniously and synergistically inside our body all throughout the day. And so whether you're eating oats for breakfast with walnuts and blueberries and have peanut butter, almond butter sandwich as a snack, and then a big burrito bowl for lunch, and then a Thai noodle dish or tofu skewers with vegetables or whatever at night, it all adds up, and it adds up really easily and seamlessly. So protein has really been no problem for me for more than
Yeah,
25
and just a
years.
couple notes for the audience. We'll put the show at alchemizelife.com/plant-based athlete. And one of the things that we'll put in there is a TDEE calculator, which is the daily energy expenditure calculator, which will basically tell you based on your body weight, age, etc., like Robert said, like how many calories you need a day. And then you can use an app like MyFitnessPal or Chronometer or Chronometer, however you want to say it, to track what you're eating. And you'll be able to see how much protein you're getting, how much carbs, how much fats. And then if you use a Chronometer, you'll actually see all the micronutrients too. I'm a MyFitnessPal user because I just want to know fats, proteins, and carbs, like the macronutrients. But it's actually really illuminating in my own story, uh, Robert. When I first took on a fitness coach and started tracking my calories, I realized that, especially on my quote unquote cheat days, I would eat 5 to 10,000 calories. And I wondered for years why I could never get the body, specifically the abs that I wanted, is because I would eat, no joke, like chicken and broccoli the entire week, like super low carb, chicken and broccoli for every meal. And then one day I would just go nuts and I would eat so much on that day that I completely destroyed all the hard work I did on the 6 other days. And so it wasn't until I actually brought attention to what are my actual macronutrient and total calorie needs, and then actually, you know, following that, that I finally got the body that I always wanted. And like you said, I believe most people are just eating too many calories. And when you're on a animal centric diet, it is so easy to consume a ton of calories because it's just so calorically dense. So many of the animal based products compared to a plant based diet. So we'll put those
Right.
resources in the show notes. And one thing, speaking of protein, but also kind of bringing in the fats, one of the most illuminating things that you shared was the fact that a lot of protein bars are actually fat bars. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That was fun for me to write in the book, that I said something like the protein bars are actually fat bars wrapped in protein bars clothing, something like that. Because yeah, so you look at, so there's 4 calories per gram for protein, 4 calories per gram for carbohydrate, and 9 calories per gram for fat. So a little bit more than twice the calorie density in fat than protein and carbohydrates. And so when you look at a bar, I'm trying to think if I've got one near me. I don't. But you look at a bar and it claims to be protein bar. It says it right on the front, protein bar, and it's got 12 grams of protein or whatever. Okay, great. So how many calories of this? It's like 300 calorie bar are coming from protein. So okay, we'll do the math. So there's 12 grams of protein or 4 calories per gram. So what, 48, right? So now there's 250 other calories. Where are those coming from? Let's just say there's, I don't know, let's say there's 10 grams of fat. I'm just making that up. That's probably on the very low end, quite frankly. But let's say there's 10 grams of fat. Well, that's fewer grams than protein, right? It's 12 grams of protein, only 10 grams of fat. But if there's 9 calories per gram of fat, there's 90 calories from fat. Okay. And what do we have? 48 of protein. So now we have twice the number of calories, more than twice the number of calories from fat already. We haven't even talked about carbohydrates, which are usually the base of these bars anyway. They're mostly carbohydrate bars with fat and protein being battling it out for second and third. And so oftentimes what you'll find is that a protein bar is actually a carbohydrate and fat bar with a little bit of protein in it, because they have to put in the oats.
The low carb protein bars are like pure fat bars.
Right. So it's a low carb bar. It's gonna be a high fat bar. If it's a low fat bar, it's a high carb bar. Protein is just kind of like this, the same neutral 10, 12, 15, 20 grams or whatever. But because it's only 4 calories per gram, it doesn't change a whole lot. And bars tend to be 300 calories or so, or 250, 300 calories per bar. And you've got to usually have the chocolate coating in there to make it edible. You got to have chocolate or chocolate chips or syrups or all this other stuff. So you've got added sugars oftentimes. You've got added fats from the chocolates and the sweets that are added to it, the fillers, whatever the base is, there's a peanut butter or something in it. And so protein bars aren't really protein bars. It's hard to find one. In fact, I do have one bar here, but it's not advertised as a protein bar. I was just going to look. It's on my desk. 240 calories. I'm just looking at this the first time. 17 grams of fat, 19 grams carbohydrate, 5 grams protein. So this is not advertised as a protein bar. It's a food bar. That's what it's called. It's a food bar. But you can even look at that breakdown, that of the 240 calories, 17 grams, so 17 times 9, whatever the math is there, is fat. And then carbohydrate, again, 19 grams, even more grams than fat, but fewer calories, of course, being only 19 times 4. And then protein takes up 20 calories of the whole bar.
How many calories total in the bar? 240? 153 are from fat.
Yeah, so it's mostly a fat bar, and then carbohydrate, and this is just a regular food bar. And that's a bar that's not trying to be protein bar, but the ones that are trying to be protein bars are still fat and carbohydrate bars. So it's just kind of an interesting way to look at the labeling of something. And that's a whole other story. Food labeling is its whole other unique world out there where you can kind of list whatever you want. One quick example, maybe your listeners aren't aware of, because most people aren't. I'll give you 2 examples. I may have written about it in the book. I'm not sure, but I certainly have talked about it over the years. Did you know that 2% milk, cow's milk, 2% fat, milk is actually 35% fat?
I did not.
Nope. Have you heard that? Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's 35% fat. It's labeled as 2% fat, but that's because they're doing it based on weight and volume, not on calories, which is the only thing that matters. Right.
I'm shaking my head. Yeah.
So let me give you an example. So let's say you took an empty gallon, just an empty gallon jug, and you put multiple tablespoons of oil, olive oil, at the bottom. So what is that? 120 calories per tablespoon or so. So you have 3 of those, 360 calories, right? Pure fat. But you fill the whole rest of the gallon with water. You have something that is still 360 calories of pure fat. But because if you're measuring it by volume, you say, no, this is 99% fat free. Because look at all this substance here. Look at this whole thing here. The fat's only at the bottom, but that doesn't matter because the rest is water. It's still 360 calories of pure fat, just watered down. And so milk does the same thing. Milk says, well, this is only 2% fat because it's in this entire big, large volume container. But when you look at the calorie breakdown, no, the real calorie breakdown of that substance is 35% fat. And we wonder why we're having some sort of, problem, with obesity and being overweight. Look at oil spray like Pam or some
Yeah.
cooking spray.
Yep.
Right? Remember those? Those are 100% pure fat. That's all it is. It's oil. It's 100% pure fat. But the way they're able to label it as a serving size as 1/3 of a second, which nobody follows, that serving size is so low. What they're able to say is this is a 99.9% fat-free food, which is 100% false. It's actually 100% fat. That's all it is. There's nothing else in it. It is 100% fat. But they're saying, no, it's 99% fat-free because you just spray it for 1/3 of a second and it doesn't register. The serving size is not big enough to have to qualify to be counted as fat. And so people just spray, look, it's fat-free. Just spray it all over their food and they're spraying 100% pure
Yeah.
fat. And so the same is with flavors and all these other things you could put on a label that don't have to accurately represent what is really in the food. And so that's where we run into a lot of problems with thinking that cow's milk is really 1 or 2% fat when it's not, or that oil.
That's crazy.
Right.
I've up until you just shared that story about the milk, I'd never heard that, but that totally makes sense. And again, it's like the things that companies are doing for marketing and to make money, like it's very questionable and pretty out of integrity, if you ask me. I'm curious on that note, and this is a personal interest to me, those like dressings that are like calorie free. Tell me, is there any insight I should be aware about those? Because I definitely have a few in my cupboard.
Yeah, that's a good question. I've got some at home as well. I'm not so sure. I'd have to look closer at those. I know they have some specific ingredients like sweeteners and stuff that make them taste, whether it's a stevia or something that makes them, or some other calorie free sweetener that makes it taste, certain flavor, make it taste
Yeah.
palatable without having the extra oil calories. But I'd have to check
Yeah.
for sure. But it is definitely worth asking about and looking into because there is so much questionable behavior in food
Yeah.
labeling. And I worked for some nutrition companies for years, and so I got some insights as well. You don't have to even disclose all ingredients. If it's something like, it only has to be like 85% organic to be able to have the organic label on it. There's all types of things. You don't really have to share all the details, and you can make these various claims of being a fat-free or a low-fat food, or I have all these props around me, like just because I'm sitting here at my desk, but you can do things like just fill the bottom of a container with oil. This is just a pressed juice, but you could put oil, hundreds of calories in here and top it with water or some other substance and measure it based on the volume of the ounces or the weight and say, oh yeah, this is fat-free food when it's completely all
Yeah.
fat. And so there's a lot of different ways that labels are pretty
Yeah.
tricky. And sodium can get tricky in understanding how much and looking at serving sizes versus the whole package or whatever. Those can throw people off. And so looking at the ingredients is always a good way to go. And little things like we talked about this in the book that your entire daily added sugar recommendation could be met in one single sports drink. Like the entire full day's worth of added sugar for your diet based on health recommendations could be achieved in one little drink. In fact, this one has a bunch of added sugars, which worried me. It's 100% juice, but it says 100% juice, but it has a bunch of added sugars
Yeah.
to it.
Yeah. So usually,
Or naturally occurring sugars.
yeah. So probably the easiest thing for people to do is just follow a whole food plant-based diet. You don't have to be 100% whole food. My goal is to be 80 to 90% whole foods and then enjoy the processed vegan foods that are just like crazy delicious. And that way I'm able to maintain a high level of fitness and really great health, both daily well-being and longevity. And which is really important to me because, Robert, the reason I went vegan was because I was inspired by the bodybuilders in the Game Changers But the reason I stayed vegan is because both my parents have cancer. My mom had breast cancer and my dad has prostate cancer. And when I went down the proverbial vegan rabbit hole, I learned that having 4 servings of dairy a day increases your chance of having prostate cancer by something crazy like 200%. And like you can eat a yogurt and have a cup of milk, and that's 4 servings of dairy. And I was like, my dad having cancer has both my parents having cancer has been emotionally, spiritually, mentally, like the most one of the most hardest things I've ever been through. And so in order for me to make sure that I don't put my wife through that, put my brothers through that, any children I have that, like I have to start now. I can't wait till I'm in my 70s and have cancer to be like, okay, now I'm going to adopt a lifestyle and a diet that promotes health and longevity. Like I have to start 20, 30, 40 years ahead. So that's the reason, I've stayed vegan is for those long-term benefits. And from all the reading and research I've done, and I think you talk about this in the book too, is a whole food plant-based diet is really the only diet so far that's scientifically proven to reduce and the chances of cancer, as well as even reverse it. And until they come out with science that says otherwise, for me, this is a whole lifestyle for me. Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. This show is brought to you by Feel Free from Botanic Tonics. This product is unlike anything I've ever had before. No joke. It's made with kava root and other ancient plants, and just half a shot gives me this incredible sense of focused flow and productivity. And I love to take just half a shot right before I work out. I take it with my pre-workout, and it takes my workouts to the next level. It is seriously unlike anything I've ever had. It's also an incredible productivity tool for any big work projects that you have or long periods of time where you just need to be super focused in flow state and get a lot of shit done. So if you want to give this a shot, you can go to botanictonics.com and use code DRAGON at checkout to get 40% off your first order. No joke, 40% off with code DRAGON. That's Feel Free from botanictonics.com, code DRAGON. Feel free, feel good.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. I'm really sorry to hear that about both of your parents. It's a scary thing that it's something like you probably know this statistics better than me. It's something like 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 now Americans will likely develop cancer that will reveal itself and manifest itself in our bodies, where it's mostly dormant for a lot of us, but then it manifests and becomes a full blown issue we have to deal with. It's becoming increasingly high. 1 in 2 or 1 in 3 people, very common. And from the World Health Organization that certain foods are class 1 or class 2A carcinogens. That means they probably are going to lead to breast cancer, probably going to lead to colon cancer or other various types of cancers with just as strong correlation, just as strong of a link as smoking cigarettes and developing lung cancer. We know that now. In fact, these warnings are all over, whether it's the CDC or World Health Organization or the T.H. Chan Harvard School of Public Health. People are trying to get the word out. It's just, we live in a society. We are a fast food nation, as I mentioned earlier. We do the convenience. We are addicted to the foods that we grew up eating. We grew up eating milk and eating cheese and eating eggs and eating meat. It's part of the American way. 97% of Americans still eat that way. And that's I'm in my 40s now. Growing up, I never heard about things. I know they existed. I never heard about type 2 diabetes. I didn't know 1 in every 2 people I would meet on the street would develop cancer. Or develop type 2 diabetes, or now we have 3/4 of the population overweight. It wasn't like that in the 80s, 90s growing up. We've concentrated our calories. We've reduced our exercise. We've been more stationary. We have laptops now, smartphones, Netflix, things that keep us indoors. and we like the foods that we like. We're addicted. We have addictive personalities, and foods are sometimes they're just too hard to resist. I mean, sugar, oil, and salt. That's why restaurant food exists. I mean, no matter what dish you get, a sandwich or a soup or a noodle dish or a meat dish or whatever, it's sugar, oil, and salt that makes you come back and come back for more and more. We get addicted to
Yeah.
those things. And that leads to high sodium intake. The oil leads to high calorie intake. And people eat thousands of calories a day without knowing it, and become overweight, obese, damage their endothelial cells, create plaque buildup in their arteries, increase the likelihood of all cause mortality. And then the sugar, we can only have, what is it? I have it in the book somewhere, like 32 grams or something of added sugar per day, which one bottle of Gatorade suffice. We'll cover that
Yeah.
for sure. What about all the other sugar that's added as sweeteners into our pastries and into our candy bars and even our protein bars or our fat bars, into our desserts, into our treats, into our snacks, into the things that we graze on throughout the day? And all of those things, sugar, oil, and salt, are a danger to the American
Yeah.
healthcare system or to the Western healthcare system. And I'm not saying, you made the point that, yeah, we're better off with a whole food plant-based diet. That's right. But I'm also a fan of enjoying vegan pizza and enjoying burritos and
Me
enjoying
too.
Thai food and all of that stuff. It's just that the point that I try to make in the book is that the foundation's got
Yeah.
to be good. If the foundation is good, then there's room for all that other stuff. It's just that for most people, the average person eats about a dozen things per day. That's it. A dozen foods throughout the whole day: breakfast, lunch, dinners, dessert, snacks, the same dozen things. That inherently wouldn't be problematic, except for the fact that like 10 out of the 12 things people eat every day are
Yeah.
bad for us. And so if we can just reduce that, because we're eating typically a meal filled with animal protein, cholesterol, saturated fat, high fat, added sugar, oil, and salt for breakfast, for lunch, and for dinner. And then obviously for dessert, things like ice creams and such, which are very concentrated in those components. That doesn't set us up for longevity or for health or for fighting disease. This contributes to disease. And so we have to do what fights disease: the anti-inflammatory foods, the whole foods, the ones that are filled with fiber, the ones that are filled with vitamins and minerals. We have the over $100 billion supplement industry. It's mostly multivitamins, it's not protein
Mhm.
powders. It's people who are not eating the foods that have vitamins in them. And so we live on this animal-based, protein diet and need to supplement with vitamins and minerals to make up for that. So if we can change the foundation of our diet and just say, hey, I'm just going to include more fruits, vegetables, legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds, and there's still room to have my vegan treats in
Yeah.
there. I think, to me, that's a really good way to go.
I think for me, someone who's only a little over 2 years into their vegan lifestyle, I got a long ways to go to catch up with you, is just realizing just how incredibly fun and delicious and enjoyable eating vegan can be. And one of the things I really appreciate about the book is all the different types of meals and even like whole day of eating that you highlight for so
Yeah.
many different athletes. And it's just like fun for me to look through and be like, oh, so this bodybuilder eats this and that, and this cyclist or Olympian eats this or that. And just to see that there's a huge variety, and but also plenty of overlap, and really just you're able to find the types of meals and foods that you not only can thrive on physically and from a health perspective, but from an emotional enjoyment perspective. And that's one of the beauties of the book is it's it not only highlights these athletes who are at the top of their endeavor, but also what they actually eat. And I'm curious, like speaking of some of the athletes, who are some of your favorites if you were to pick two or three athletes and tell us about them?
That's a great question. I certainly have some favorite stories from the book, from the athlete interviews. And there's some personalities I really like, or athletes who are just closer friends and that kind of thing. But one I will talk about right now is Corinne Sutton. Corinne Sutton is, at the time, I think I wrote, a 19-time champion vegan
Hmm.
bodybuilder. For the record, I'm a 2-time vegan bodybuilder. So he's won. Now he's 23-time champion, I think, because the book's been out for almost a year, and wrote it a year before it came out and all that. So here's a guy who's won like 20 something bodybuilding competitions as a vegan. and has just incredible physique. I don't know if you saw him. He was at the street fair as well. He came by and chatted with Nima for a little while. I'm not sure, or if you're familiar
I
with
don't think
Carissa,
I saw
but
him.
incredible bodybuilder. Okay. He was working in another booth, but I mean, look him up online, just incredible physique and really great. I'm just inspired by his discipline, his habits, his routine, his conviction, his dedication to eating healthy foods, dedicating to training, dedicated to personal development and becoming the best version of himself and helping others. He's a coach and he's a trainer and he's an incredible champion bodybuilder. And I just find him to be really inspiring. Partly that's a sport that I can relate to and resonate with. And so his story kind of connects with me like that. Another one, Sonia Looney. She is a world champion mountain biker. She just had another baby just like weeks ago. She's had two little kids now, but she's a world champion mountain biker. And her stories, I mean, I would get like emotional reading them and writing them as I told her stories of just going through this, just pushing yourself, whether she was in the Himalayan mountains or Sahara Desert or, extreme situations, climates and rain and mud and high elevation and dangerous places, and just the ability to overcome and persevere and say, I'm just going to make the most of this and I'm going to be the best in the world at it. And she's so generous with her information. I mean, she's a world champion athlete. It's not, you don't come across those people every day, like walking around the grocery store or whatever, someone who's the best on the entire planet of almost 8 billion people at her sport. Like you don't come across that very often. So I'm very fortunate. I had a chance to have these conversations through phone and email and all that kind of stuff. And I found her to be really inspiring. Darcy Gaither, not a lot of people have probably heard about her. She kayaked the entire length of the Amazon River. What a story she had to go through. I mean, she even had to cut her hair to disguise her identity. She could have been attacked by pirates in various countries all along the Amazon River just because of her gender. And so she kayak this, what is it, 5,000 miles or whatever. I don't know how, I forget. It's the exact same length as the Nile River. They're the longest tide. They're essentially tied. They're like 20 miles apart, like their length. It's thousands of miles long. And the Nile and the Amazon River are basically tied as the world's longest. And she took her 5 months to kayak that thing, doing it on a plant-based diet through, incredible, whether it's whitewater or dangerous situation, going through all these different countries. Inspirational story. And then Vanessa Espinosa is one of my all-time favorites. Of course, she's a training partner of mine. She lives here in Colorado where I live. And she was drafted into the WNBA. She was an All-American basketball player, a 3-time Golden Gloves Colorado State boxing champion, honoring her late father, who was a pro boxer. And then she almost set a world record in her very first powerlifting meet. And she's been vegan for more than 20 years. And she transformed my career as well. I mean, I wrote a book with her called Plant-Based Muscle, and we co-authored it. And it was largely a testament to the impact that she had on me and why I wanted to co-author a book with her and share that. So those are just a few stories. I think Robbie Ballinger has one of the most exciting stories in the book. He ran across America in 75 days. Do the math, Justin. I mean, so 3,000 miles, a little over 3,000, I believe, 75 days. Plus he had multiple rest days because he had to recover. So even without rest days, that's averaging about 43 to 46 miles per day, if I'm not mistaken. So a marathon and a half every single day, just day in and day out, regardless of the conditions, regardless of the climate, regardless of the terrain, regardless of how he felt. And then a few rest days here and there just to recover with some sore quads or knees or whatever. But so many days he probably covered over 50 miles in a single day, only to go to sleep in an RV or tent and have to do it again the next day and the next day and the next day. His story was so fun to tell. Like that was really fun. So there's a lot of them. I don't want to give them all away, of course.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good sprinkling for the audience. They can get the book pretty much anywhere books are sold. It's a really It's a fun read. It's not like, okay, I'm going to get bored to death with nutrition, but it's like highly entertaining as it educates and
Thank you.
empowers you. And you can find whatever your physical endeavor is, you can find an athlete that's either doing it or doing something similar to it because you covered such a wide breadth of sport endeavors. The other thing that I thought was incredibly awesome about the book was that it is really at its core, and maybe it's wearing some different clothing, but it's a personal development book. And I'm a huge personal development junkie. And I was just like, the amount of mindset and goal setting stuff that's in there is really incredible. So I'd love to touch on that just a little bit before we transition into your lifelong pursuit of becoming who you have become.
Well, Justin, I'm glad you recognize that because, as I often say, on the speaking stage, I have no business being here. I was a skinny farm kid. I had no business becoming a champion vegan bodybuilder and creating that industry from its infancy to where it is today, decades later. Really, no business doing that. I don't have a degree in English or anything like that, or a background in this writing business. Aside from it's something I've passionately pursued and enjoyed doing. I have no business writing one of the best-selling books of the entire year in 2021, outselling Oprah Winfrey, going head to head, Barack Obama, some pretty big time names, John Grisham. For a period of time, I absolutely outsold them on Amazon and in brick and mortar stores. And we landed number 4 on the New York Times bestseller list, ahead of Brene Brown and all kinds of incredible authors. And became a number 1 international bestseller, which obviously finishing number 1 in its entire category, which actually is a little bit of a motivational category. It's the miscellaneous how-to and what is it? It's the personal development kind of category. It's the advice. So it's advice, how-to, and miscellaneous. That's where we finished number 4 in the US, number 1 in Canada. And so we're up against the Tony Robbins types of the world, and we outperformed them and then outsold all the other books. There's millions on
Yeah.
Amazon. And we were at one point ranked number 15 in the US of all literature and number 9. At least that's the highest I saw in Canada. Then we just sold out. We could have gone even higher, and that's on Amazon. And we did very well in brick and mortar stores. And there's a reason for that. That's why there's that motivational personal development undertone in the book, because I figured out at a young age how to make the most of the 1,440 minutes we have every day. I'll tell you a secret right now. No one knows this. You know when I left? When I left LA 11
Would you
days ago,
leave?
I started 11 days ago. I left when I saw you, and I started a new book, and I'm already 140 pages into it in 11 days,
Wow.
because I know in this podcast, I was like, oh man, it gets into my writing time. Like that's for real. Like, I'm like, oh man, this interview, because I was trying to get as much done as I can tonight. But like that, I figured that out, Justin. I figured out the most important thing I figured out was how to connect the dots ahead of time. So imagine me being this skinny little guy trying to be this bodybuilder. Like, yeah, it was laughable at first when I was getting started, but I'm like, yeah, but not 2 years from now, not 7 years from now, not a decade from now. I'm going to be on magazine covers. And guess what? I was on magazine covers. I've been on 4 or 5 of them now. Been featured in magazines, probably 40 magazines around the world total. I had a vision for all of this stuff. Someone asked me just the other day, I was giving a talk, signing books out at an animal sanctuary of all places, out here in Erie, Colorado. And a woman approached me. She said, did you ever imagine that you would become a New York Times bestselling author? And I said, absolutely. Like, I predicted it. Like, did I? Absolutely. In fact, I predicted it a long time ago. I predicted it when I was 8 years old in 1988 in Mrs. Young's 3rd grade class. And I worked at it and I worked at it and I worked at it. And I self-published books. I got rejected by every publisher I pitched to. I got turned down. I got all kinds of things. I was sleeping in my car, selling books out of my trunk, running out of money, doing my thing. And eventually I caught some breaks. And I was invited to speak in Australia and in London and in China and in Toronto and in the Caribbean, and been to every continent except for Antarctica and Africa to date, doing this kind of thing. And so I knew that translated beyond just being a champion athlete and writing a book. I knew it could transfer over to any area of life. And that's why that was the foundation of this book. that of course, there was an undertone of motivation and inspiration because why do you do what you do? Tell me, why do you want why do you want to be an athlete? Or why do you want to change your diet? Or why do you want to make a difference in the world around you? Or why even bother to be the best version of yourself? Who cares? But if you can answer that question and put some meaning behind that question or behind your answer, if you can put some meaningful conversation and discourse behind your answer of why you want to do something, that's what's going to compel you to do it. Why, even though as I told you before we got on camera, I've been, working behind the scenes here. I even got a little bit of a head cold the past 3 days, but it didn't slow me down from working on the next book that I'm writing right now. And in fact, I'm writing what I think is some of my best work, some of the best work I've ever done, because I'm connecting the dots ahead of time. What's going to happen when that book comes out or when the next one comes out? And the people that I might be able to impact, or the way it might change my life, or the impact it might have on the world around me. That's what I think about. And so whether you're trying to just lose a little bit of weight and feel better for your own reasons, to be more confident, or just to be more comfortable, or to set an example, or to just change some health things going on in your life, or whether you want to start even late in life and decide you want to be a great athlete. Like, I think things in here, we wrote it that way, that will get you fired up to say, I've got a finite amount of heartbeats. I've got a finite amount of minutes per day, minutes per lifetime. What can I do with that time? What can I do with that time it doesn't have to leave a legacy. It doesn't have to inspire generations. It just has to be what you want to get out of your life, and what means the most to you. And I think there's universal truths in this book that can be applied to anyone in anywhere in their life, because I've seen how it's worked for me and for all those great athletes that I interviewed. And it all started with answering those questions. Why do you do what you do?
Hey there, just a few words about the incredible show sponsors for today's episode, and then we'll dig right back in. Today's show is brought to you by Fit Rich Vegan. If you're ready to get in the best shape of your life, double your income, and 10x your savings and investments, then this is the coaching program for you. But wait a minute, Dragon. Isn't this your coaching program? Heck yeah, it is. I spent the last 8 years mastering my fitness and my finances, and I've built an incredible coaching program with an incredible team to help you get the body of your dreams and finally achieve that level of financial success that you've been seeking. So if you want to find out if you're a good fit for the program, go to fitrichvegan.com and book your free consultation today. Or you can just DM me on Instagram with the words Fit Rich Vegan, and we can chat about if it's going to be a good fit for you. I'm committed to empowering people to actually achieve their fitness and financial goals. I spent the last 20 years trying to figure this out on my own. And what I realized is the key to doing it is not doing it alone. You have to have coaches, you have to have mentors, and you have to be a part of masterminds. And that's exactly what Fit Rich Vegan has. It has coaches, mentors, and it is a mastermind. So again, if you're ready to book your free consultation today, go to fitrichvegan.com or drop me a DM on Instagram. There's definitely a through line through all the different stories and a lot of parallels. And a big part of it is mindset. And I think that's one of your superpowers in regards to becoming a New York Times best-selling author, a dream you had at 8, and it took you until
Yeah,
your 40s and numerous failed attempts,
yeah,
is your
sure.
mindset. And it's the same reason so many of these athletes climb to the top of their field, even though they were doing it different. They were doing it on a vegan diet. And I love the book because it's so inspirational from that mindset standpoint. But there's also like takeaways like goal setting in there and just like habits and designing that lifestyle for yourself. So I want to ask you, Robert, and this is maybe a deep question is, in your current state of life, what is a life worth living to you right now?
Yeah, that's I think a question where the answer evolves all the time. It changes depending on, it definitely changes for me based on where I am at a certain time in my life. Obviously, maybe not obviously, but when I was younger, I wanted to be famous, and for maybe some superficial reasons. I wanted to be famous and in the spotlight and all this kind of stuff. And in my current state, I've been dealing with anxiety I actually just got a notification on Facebook this morning. I texted it to my wife because she was out visiting a friend. It was from 7 years ago. And it was the time when I first developed this anxiety that I've been dealing with ever since. And I said, man, it's been 7 years I've been dealing with this stuff. And that changes my outlook on things, where now it's hard for me to be in the spotlight. It's hard for me to, um, want to, be famous, or I have completely different mindset from like what I want to do with my life right now. Part of it is maturing, obviously, or getting a little bit older, or changing perspectives, or being married versus being single, or having this job versus a different job, or being a major best-selling author versus a self-publishing author just trying to make it, and all of that. There's a lot of factors, but I think the biggest thing for me, and I know you know this because you've seen some other podcasts I've done recently, but losing people that were close to me has made me change my own priorities and want me to have this life worth living and have it count, knowing that some of my good friends or family members don't have that opportunity. They didn't wake up, including my best friend who passed away at age 41. I still see his family. I travel back often. It's 1,000 miles away, but I travel back and see his wife and kids and take them out to the video arcades. And I did that just a few weeks ago and sent them a bunch of gifts from Amazon little things that I knew they wanted, going back for birthdays and for high school graduation and that kind of stuff, because that's more meaningful to me now than it was before. I think before is honestly about me. In fact, you know what I was doing when we started this podcast? I remember I told you I was just attending an event. It was my childhood friend. His sister was killed in a car accident a month ago. And so it was the service. I went back to visit with him in person, but I attended the service virtually today because it's in Oregon and I'm here in Colorado, and prioritizing that. And that service ended just as we were hopping on to do this podcast, which is why I got on just 1 minute before it started, because that's what I was doing. Because my, I guess I'm realizing that life is a lot more fragile, I guess, than I thought. I was always kind of indestructible. I was always very confident that I could do all these things and that things were just going to be there. Like, you don't expect that your world is going to change that much. Like that your closest friends will die randomly, or maybe not randomly, but because of diet, lifestyle diseases, or COVID, or whatever, that you're going to lose family members who are there one day and just don't wake up the next day, having a heart attack in their sleep. These are things that I've gone through recently. And part of that's just getting older too. Just getting older, realizing, man, this is a rough stage of life where, parents and aunts and uncles and others but their health is declining as they get older. So that allows me to reprioritize my time. I've been this somewhat obsessive workaholic, because I think I was always searching for uh, for recognition, like wanting to be given credit for something, or to be acknowledged, because I was always a hard worker and I wanted people to see that. And now I'm not so concerned about that. Like, even writing a best-selling book, one of my favorite aspects was the acknowledgments and acknowledging my teachers from third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, high school, people who supported me. I'm really writing for other people, not for myself anymore. And so for me, a life worth living and time well spent is, what impact am I having on those around me? And for so long, it was just focused on me. But I can tell you, I can tell you the impact that I've had on others recently, like my friend's family when he passed away in September, parents, his sister, his wife, his kids, or my friend who just not only lost his sister, he lost his sister on her way home. She was killed in a car accident from their mother's service. He just lost his mom, his dad, and his sister in a 4-month period. And I attended one of the services in person. checked in on him on the other one and tuned in live today and took some screenshots and all that and from the streaming of the service. And I was there for him a few weeks ago. Shortly after his sister was killed, I flew back to Oregon and spent time with him. And that stuff matters to me much more now. Like the influence that I can have on other people, like when I'm there for them, when they need something. Or as I talked about in Nehemiah's podcast, being there for my little 6-year-old nephew, travel there, be there for a soccer game, something he might remember, or be very meaningful for him that I took the time out of my busy schedule as a writer and speaker and traveler to go watch his little soccer game. Like that means more to me now. So tonight I'm doing this podcast, and then I'd like to keep writing my book. My wife booked tickets for this comedy club for me and her best friend's boyfriend. And I used to resent that stuff, to be honest. Man, it cuts into my projects that are going to change the world or whatever. Like I think a lot of it was ego too. Like my work is more important. I'm changing the world. Like I can't go out on a Friday night or a Saturday night or a Sunday. I got to do this. So I had this obsessive workaholism, which impacted my relationship, impacted my family, impacted me. I think it's even part of the reason why I'm a little run down right now. I've been staying up till 1, 2 in the morning every night on a sprint to finish this book because, as I was telling my wife, I've always been chasing something. Like that's a term I've been using, but I don't talk about. In fact, I've maybe rarely talked about it on podcasts, maybe once ever. I don't know exactly where it comes from. I talked to one of my best friends about it. I guess my current best friend back in Oregon. I talk about it. But I'm always chasing something. And so it never stops. My wife and I have been together for 11 years now. And all this time, I said, just wait till the next project. Then everything is set, financially, everything. Like, just wait till my next book comes out. And sure enough, this book came out, became a New York Times bestseller, but not much changed. I got 10 or 20,000 new social media followers. I still haven't even received a royalty check. I still got to sell 1,000 more books before I get a royalty check. It didn't change our world or our life in the way that I kept saying, give me another year, give me another 2 more years, give me another book. Once I have 7 books out there, imagine when they're all doing royalties every few months, wait till there's 10 books out there. Always chasing something. And so right now I guess what I'm reflecting on is that if I just spend all this time chasing whatever it is, chasing fame or opportunity or celebrity culture or acceptance or verification or acknowledgement or significance, I'm just chasing all this stuff. I miss what's in front of me. And so I think that is shaped the way that I approach life now is that I spent a lot of time chasing after things. Many I achieved, many I didn't. But in the process, I pretty much pushed everybody else away because it was all about me and these like lifelong goals I wanted to achieve. And don't get me wrong, Justin, some of these lifelong dreams I achieved are incredible. It's super meaningful to write a book that's so popular and travel around the world and, get paid to speak and all expenses paid trips to Asia and Australia and Europe. I mean, it's really cool. But there's a price to all of it. And then when you go through those things like loss of a really close friend or a family or just relationship ends or whatever, or friendships end because of this obsession with this pursuit, whatever this pursuit is, I think you miss out on a big part of that life. And I just lost another relative just recently. Same week, my friend's sister was killed in that car accident. I lost one of my favorite relatives. I know we probably shouldn't play favorites, but we all have them, whether we admit it or not. It was a little more expected. She was older, in her 90s, but my first reaction, aside from sadness, was guilt because I've been dealing with this anxiety issue, which is hard for me to be around people a lot of times, including like being at the booth with you and everyone else. Like that was hard for me. I can't explain it. It's just a situation I've got that just developed and manifested itself 7 years ago. And so I would have loved to have spent a lot more time with my relative, my great aunt Seta, but I chose to stay home instead because it was uncomfortable for me to leave the house and be around people. And now I can't. Maybe that's selfish. Maybe I was work, but I also know she would have loved more visits too. She was in assisted living place for many years and I made multiple trips out there, but I could have done more. And I know she would have enjoyed that too. Not just me. It's not just what I got out of it. And so I have a little bit of regret. Same with my friend who passed. Like I was busy writing books. I couldn't always answer the phone or couldn't always chat, or I couldn't always visit because I was doing other things, and I was dealing with my own anxiety, which I could take more actions to deal with it. I've done the medical, all the tests and all the blood work and all that stuff, and there's just no solution yet, except for it's just something that high performers get. But I could do some counseling, I could do some therapy and stuff that I've been too lazy to pursue. And now I feel like, man, did I lose out on a chunk of the last 7 years of social engagement and having an impact on people's lives and having them impact my life in meaningful ways because I chose not to deal with this thing and just hide in a basement like where I'm at right now and just write books behind the scenes because that's my own personal goal. So it certainly caused me to reflect a lot, and I'm still reflecting, and it's an ongoing
I
process.
think you're at a really beautiful place, Robert, and thank you for being willing to be powerfully vulnerable. I really admire you and your strength through your vulnerability and sharing. And what occurred to me is through this book, The Plant-Based Athlete, and your other books and all the work you've done, you've had a massive impact on thousands, if not millions, of people's lives. And you've done a really great service for so many people and for this world. And now you're experiencing a bit of a homecoming to have potentially more of an impact in that inner like circle of family. And there's no wrong time. It's never too late to redesign your life in a way that is, bringing the meaning to you in your current evolution. And you've gone through a massive evolution. You literally just achieved a goal that you've had since you were 8 years old. So you've been working on this goal for 30 plus years. To think that your perspective isn't going to change and that you're not going to have made some sacrifices for that is completely crazy. So it's really beautiful to witness your transformation that you're going through right now, and hearing how you're showing up for your family now and how you're showing up for your friends now. Like, Robert, you have nothing to regret or nothing to be ashamed of. The positive impact that you've had in this world is more than most ever get the privilege to do. And it's never too late to bring that same level of impact to your close family and your close friends. So I think you're exactly where you need to be, brother. And I think you're designing your life to be one that's really worth living for you right now as you're inflecting and transitioning into a different time, a different perspective. And that's perfect. So I'm really proud of you, brother.
Well, I appreciate that. It is a lot to take on and to think about having those feelings of regret, or maybe I prioritize things wrong, or maybe I prioritize them right. It's just, I think we all have that. We all have that. You kind of looking back over our shoulder, like wondering what might have been, and we've taken a slightly different direction in life. But I think it's a natural thing. And I think the best thing we can do is to be present with that and realize, okay, every single day is a new start. Where do I go
Yep.
from here? And I have aspirations that are totally different now. Like I have aspirations of not being on social media or the internet at all, and living in a community and maybe on a beach somewhere, and not like this retired paradise kind of thing, but just to scale down some of the stress of daily life and expectations, and doing what I've done for so long, and just do something
Yeah.
different and be part of an in-person community and just eat a bunch of healthy whole foods and hang out and exercise outside. And like that's a new vision
Yeah.
for me. And I could write during my downtime, or as a relaxation thing, or as a hobby, or as a passion, rather than got to meet these deadlines and have to achieve expectations of publisher, and got to do 150 podcasts, and got to do these in-person things. And,
Just have to do
you know,
mine. That's it.
but I will tell you one last thing here. One of the really rewarding things I will say that came from all of this stuff is that I've signed books in 112 bookstores so far. And it is so fun
Man, the fact that
to
mine
walk in.
says dragon on it. Oh, this is a lifelong keeper for me. It's the first time I met you, and you gave this to me as a gift, and you're such a
Yeah.
sweetheart.
Well, thank you. I can't tell you what it feels like to walk into a bookstore, a big, like 2 or 3 story Barnes and Noble bookstore in Los Angeles or San Diego or Phoenix and see my book right there, or to walk into my hometown bookstore, small college town, and like my book is on the bestseller list in my hometown, knowing that maybe that made somebody smile. Maybe the parents of one of my classmates who still lives in the town and saw
30
this and said,
years
what
in
the
the
heck?
making. A
Yeah.
true inspiration, seriously, for people. Like, that's, and tying it back to the book, it being a personal development book in the disguise of a plant-based athlete, I think this is just such a testament to just the positive impact that you have in this world, Robert. And I'm really proud of you. And I know I've kept you for a very long time. So as we wrap this up, are there any last things that you want to share with the audience?
Oh man. Well, appreciate you, Dragon, having me on and making the time, and for your kind words and thoughtful questions today, for your genuine interest in the book. I mean, that is the culmination of my life's work, so to speak, as an author and as an athlete, and putting it all together in one big hardcover mainstream book. I appreciate the platform and the opportunity to talk about it. It's something that means a lot to me. I usually end every talk I give with a specific quote. Maybe that's what I'll do
Sounds good.
today. It's a quote from, you've probably heard me say it. It's a quote from H. Jackson Brown Jr., who said, 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the things that you did do. And it's a call to action to follow your passion and make it happen. It's a call to action to whatever tugs at your heart, to go do it. Quitting, giving up is the easiest thing in the world. Sometimes it's the right thing. But for something that just never leaves, like that is just always there. Like for writing, that was for me. I had no business doing it. I was getting rejected all over the place. I couldn't finish a book. I wasn't any good at first. It took some time. But over the years, I got better because I never let that spark go out. I wouldn't let
Yeah.
go of it. So find that spark. So because whether it's 20 years from now or 2 years from now, you don't want to be asking what might have been. And so that's what I encourage people to do, is to find what moves you and to go for it. And you may surprise yourself. It may work out in more glorious ways than you ever imagined. And it could be something that creates an entire different life for yourself that is rewarding and fulfilling and has the ability to impact other people, and is just something that's really satisfying. And I'm very fortunate that I found that. Not everyone does. And I recognize that. I understand how lucky I am to have been able to do that. And it came from that incredible persistence of, this means too much to me to let it go. And so I'm going to just keep going, and I'll eventually figure it out. And through trial and error and through practice, I'll get better and I'll get better and I'll get better. And maybe someday it'll be accepted. It'll be appreciated by others. And sure enough, so far it's worked out that way. So that's why I encourage people
That's
to
a
do.
beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Robert. I'm so grateful to be able to call you a real friend, to have spent time with you in person, to spend time with you here online, virtually. And the best place to find you online before we shut this down?
Yeah, I've been running veganbodybuilding.com for 20 years, and I'm just at Robert Cheeke on most platforms, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and then Vegan Bodybuilding and Fitness as well. And then the books you can find, like you said, books are sold.
Boom. Thanks, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning in. And remember, literally everything can be used as an opportunity to learn, to heal, to grow, and to transform. So whatever is going on in your life, choose to consciously and proactively harness that energy and use it to alchemize your life to the next level. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend or on your favorite social media, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. As always, you can find me at Justin David Carl on Instagram and all the socials, as well as at alchemizelife.com on the web. Until the next time, sending you lots of energy and plenty of dragon magic.